From breathing to reading and inflection and projection, mic technique and voice care tips. Hello, I'm Peter Stewart. Get a better broadcast, podcast and video voice with me through this series of podcasts and also the accompanying book that I'm working on at the moment and leading you through almost paragraph by paragraph, day by day in this podcast series. Thanks for the loan of your ears. On Twitter, I'm Peter Stewart, TWEETERSTEWART, and more ways to contact me via the show notes of this episode. So, if you think back a couple of 3 days when we were talking about the air pressure coming up from your lungs and going over the vocal folds and the amount of times that they're changing shape and fluttering, if you like, to create the sound that becomes your voice. We've got that pressured air being forced through, regulated by those folds, opening, closing, colliding essentially hundreds of times a second. And the amount of air and the speed at which it travels over the vocal folds determines the volume of the sound we make. So yesterday we looked at the pitch of the sound, but it's the amount of air and the speed which creates the volume of the sound. And we change this, of course, depending on our situation. So we're going to be using a different volume or a different projection in different circumstances. Just imagine how you're speaking to somebody on the phone or how I'm speaking to you now through the microphone, yeah, and I've got a much softer voice. If I'm calling across the office, then it's going to be a little bit more, cup of tea, yeah, oh yes please, yeah, milk no sugar, thanks very much, yeah. You're going to be using a bit more projection. If you're working in a restaurant and you've got a lot of hubbub going on behind and perhaps you've got some clattering of pots and pans and so on in the kitchen and air extractors and filters and maybe some music, there's a radio, you're going to be forcing your voice even more with the projection, with the volume, with the force that you're using. Now the folds collide harder when you make a louder sound. When you're projecting, shouting or singing, they collide more often the higher your pitch, whether speaking or singing. So put those two elements together. If you are singing a high note, then you've got an awful lot of collision going on with your vocal folds. When the folds collide harder or more often, small temporary pinhead-sized swellings appear on them, which can cause difficulty in them closing properly. And they have to close properly to help with the formation, the phonation of your sounds, which become words. When they try to close, with these small swellings on, small gaps appear between the folds, and between those air escapes, and it's that which causes that husky sound in your voice. You may know this if you've shouted a lot at a football match, or you've gone to a music gig or something like that, or you work in a pub and you're hoarse the next day. That's what's causing your voice to become hoarse. Now you can feel the buzz of your folds at work if you, and I'm doing this now myself, if you just rest your fingertips on your Adam's apple, small kind of bump on the front of your throat, more prominent in men, and you just say "ee" or "ah," and you can feel it move if you swallow or yawn. Yes, that's your Adam's apple at work, and just behind that is your larynx. So hopefully that's given you an idea of what is happening when you use or even perhaps abuse your vocal folds, and what happens when you shout or when you sing. So we need to use it well, don't we? And we'll talk about that tomorrow as Get a Better Broadcast, Podcast and Video Voice continues. From London, I'm Peter Stewart.